Who is K3 Soju? Why does he call himself the LeBron of TFT? Do birds really lay nests in his hair? Is he truly a flex god? And who let this guy cook? We answer some of these questions. The rest is up for you to decide. In today's video, we go over a game where Soju started with a clear vision of playing the strongest AP carry in the game, but needed to adapt his game plan to play something completely different. Soju currently is streaming at 700 LP or so. It has not been a great day of gameplay. In fact, I'll show you the scores so far. So Soju is currently averaging a 6.0 in Challenger to start off the stream, but hey, it's a long day. Everyone knows Soju streams for many hours. It seems like Soju is open to starting bow as his primary item, but I wonder what he's going to be going for if he misses. And it looks like he goes for Rod. This is an offensive carousel. Probably going to lean more towards AP. It's going to be a little bit tricky to play AD in particular with Rod because it doesn't really make that many items. But the one thing that could lead to an AD start is if you start Locket, for example, and then play Duelist. But we'll see what items he gets dropped. He gets Rel, and a Lux pair immediately catches my eye alongside Defender with Poppy. So he can link that. And all of a sudden, he has a pretty good start with Star Guardians plus Defenders. And it's about making sure that he has the proper item holder. Lux is actually quite good at killing early game units because she will focus whatever she's targeting now. It's not going to be a random cast ever since a couple patches ago. So it's been a very big buff to her early game in particular. And I guess in this case, he just buys out any shop that he feels like is good. Holding units like Ashe is not particularly really useful because she uses a lot of AD items. You're talking about Last Whisper, Deathblade, etc. And so when you look at it, he also had an opportunity to hold on to this Kale to make Underground, but he ends up selling it. And the reason why we're covering a lot of these 1-cost buys or 2-cost buys in the shops early is because this helps form the options that you have based off your augments. Don't just ignore stage 1 and think, okay, I'm just going to buy like whatever. Oh, cool, I like Yasuo. All right, I'm going to buy this Silas here. Everything that you buy influences the possibilities of what augments that you can start off with on the right foot and then snowball that lead. So right off the bat here, Soju gets offered Electrocharge, Defender Heart, and Band of Thieves. And I know a lot of people have been going into the data these days and looking at what is some of the statistically strong augments to start off your game, especially if it's silver and it's not a hero-based augment. If you're ever curious about how to utilize data, you can always pull up a website called tactics.tool/augments, and you can have it just on the second tab. Maybe you have it on your iPad. Hopefully you're not playing on mobile. If you are, then good luck. You just type in the 3 augments that you have on your screen and very briefly look at it. You don't have to type out the whole thing. You just type Electrocharge, for example, and then you can type Defender Heart, and then you can do Band of Thieves. And you can just type Silver, and it just gives you the 3 comparison. And if you look at these 3 options, Band of Thieves, Electrocharge are way stronger than Defender Heart. In fact, by almost half an average placement from Band of Thieves to Defender Heart. And so based off this logic, you would want to pick Band of Thieves. It even has potential 2-star units to put Band of Thieves on, like you put it on the frontline unit, and you can pick an AP item on Lux in the back to carry you. Before he makes this selection, he's not auto-choosing. He is scouting to see what's the viability of me picking a different type of augment. Can I reroll, or is it an option to take Defender Heart, which he does do, and he has 4 Defender right off the bat. And this is a really unusual choice that already puts the game in a kind of an awkward spot. But Soju knows that if he slams Archangels, for example, here, he has a really good front line, and Archangels works the better your front line is. And so he's scaling his back line while his 3 frontliners with 4 Defender is going to stall for time. And 4 Defender is really powerful, particularly in the early game, because people don't really have those big AP items and big combos. They're just going to be getting a lot of their damage through just raw power. That's why 2-star units are so effective early game, is because you just have more stats. You have more HP. Your units, whenever they attack, just deal more damage. They're naturally more tanky. And so Defender is really effective early game over something like Brawlers because you have the ability just to mitigate a lot of that auto attack damage. The downside of Soju's play is, well, Defender late game is not very good in the meta because there's so much AP currently. You're talking about Twisted Fate, Nico, Aurelion Soul, Misfortune, the list goes on and on of different AP carries. Defender gives you the armor to stop that. It doesn't stop the ability power damage. So he's going to be having to figure out a way to navigate it. He talks about in this video how he wants to go for a mech frontline, try to play around that. But most importantly, he's going to be looking for an AP carry as his backline. I think a lot of people look at mech and think you have to play a specific set of units, but remember, frontline is just another way that you can stall for whatever you want to do in your backline. So this Archangels can go on any carry. It can go on Twisted Fate and Nico for just the scaling ability power. It can go on Aurelion Soul and Misfortune. And so I'm curious to see what Soju's going to be playing here, because right now it's completely open-ended. He's getting kind of fortunate matchups. A lot of these players aren't trying to contest him from win streak. It's actually quite important that Soju is able to win, because his late game, as we mentioned, is going to be a little bit more scuffed since he has a lot of armor. And again, it's not effective against AP. So getting this win streak to get his economy going is huge. I like the pairs that he's holding. I would like to hold Sivir, but Sivir doesn't really hold the AP items very well. It's just that he has Infinity Team going on, but it's not a big priority. So you might see him skip these units because it doesn't really matter. Poppy 2 is really big. Finds a Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa is one of the best early game holders if you can combine her with Star Guardian and Quick Draw. She's very effective at holding a bunch of different items. In fact, one of the biggest things that people don't know about is currently on the 13.6 B patch, Kai'Sa is actually a really good AD holder. That's going to change soon in the next coming patches, but you could also put AD items on Kai'Sa and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Continue to scout, looking at other people's matchups, and seeing how many people are actually playing AD. Fortunately, with a lot of swords, bows, and gloves, the more you see of those, the more you'll realize Defender's effective. And even if it's just effective against 3 out of the 4 other players in your lobby, that's good enough. You don't need to have the majority of the lobby be AD to feel like defenders are good. So Soju is definitely keeping tabs on everybody. Kind of a scary matchup going against Renekton 2 with Sunfire Cape, but this is where the auto attacks, you see how tanky Poppy is? It just feels like Poppy is not dying. That's thanks to all of that armor. And Soju's able to go into a nice 3 streak while focusing on his economy. Going into the carousel, he's definitely looking at what he can play around with his vest, because he is streaking. When you are win streaking, you want to try and keep winning. Wow, great insight, Frodan, but how do you actually do that? In this case, the thing that he can play around is his vest. And you have a couple different options. You can go for a Sunfire Cape if there's a belt. You can go for a Bramble Vest. Soju actually going for tier here. Okay, so that's really interesting. Protector's Vow is actually not that bad of an item. It's actually quite underrated, especially if you can get it on a unit that is very impactful initial cast. And if he's thinking about mech, Protector's Vow is actually pretty solid on Garen mech in particular, because it gets him to cast his ability really fast and go for that big AoE stun. And stuns are always best the faster they happen, because then you're able to pick off units. And if you start the fight with your units finally being able to act, but they're stunned and then one unit get picked off, then you're basically fighting down a unit. So you want to be able to get those big AoE stuns happening faster. If you remember Sejuani from set 8.0 Monster Attack, Sejuani really liked Protector's Vow. In this case, Garen's going to be the same way. The downside of Soju slamming a Protector's Vow here is that he doesn't get the ability to make a Shojin. If a bow drops, he doesn't get to make Static Shiv. These are some really good items for him to think about to combine with his backline. But I like that Soju is focusing on balance. I think too many people just think about their carry items and they don't think enough about their frontline tank items. And he's trying to have balance. If I make an offensive item, then I can make a defense item and bring balance to my composition. The exception would be if Soju needed to make 2 items for his carry that are really crucial. You're thinking about how some people want, Last Whisper plus Gunblade in the previous set on an AD carry. That was almost mandatory on a lot of AD carries. And so people would sometimes prioritize those 2 items first and then start making the frontline items. 3 people are currently streaking. Soju has to make sure that he's able to get that win here. It looks like he did some brief scouting, but for the most part, he's not going to change his board. He thought about Viego. Like, can Viego fit in here? It's a cool unit. A lot of people love playing Oxforce, but it just doesn't fit. Instead, he's just going to commit to this board and try to get the win. It looks like this Ashe is exactly the matchup that he wants. A heavy auto attack damage composition. This Poppy is still almost effectively at full life, and that's thanks to that Protector's Vow. Really nicely done. Also, Soju's not getting too fancy with positioning, but there is one thing that he was doing. He was staggering his front line, so that way the 2-star unit would draw aggression and it wouldn't pick off the 1-star units. I think this is really small but effective optimization to make sure that aggro targeting was going on the correct unit, which is Poppy. Poppy's the tankiest unit. She instantly casts thanks to the Protector's Vow. She gets that shield, and that shield gets the benefit of that armor. The longer more units can survive, the better. Don't just spread out your front line because that's what you think you should be doing. Soju's making sure that there's focus fire on the correct target, and as a result, he's rewarded with a 5 streak. Soju's probably thinking about a lot of different things at this point. How many defenders want to play this game? Am I going to be cutting and playing fewer defenders and going Aegis so I mix my magic resistance? Am I trying to play like a 4 defender front line, just keep it here? Do I go up to 6 defender, maybe think about playing other units that can complement all that armor? These are all different things going through his mind. Soju ends up slamming a static shiv here. Slamming static shiv is quite good. You get your magic resistance shred, so it's a slammable item. Just go ahead and commit it. If he has an item that he wants to slam, he's gonna slam it because he wants to keep his win streak. Soju actually doesn't level to 6 here. A lot of people would think about preserving their streak and level to 6. People call it, you know, Bebe leveling or aggressively leveling or inting, right? Or griefing. There's a lot of ways that people call this play leveling to 6, but I think Soju recognizes he doesn't actually have a unit to play. If you think about it, if you level to play another 1-star unit like a 1-star Lux and Wukong, then don't do it. Which brings us to a general rule. Make sure if you level off curve, you have something to play. In this case, what would he play? A Vex? A Vi with no synergy? You know, does he play a Wukong 1 again? These don't really help. And he's rewarded by winning anyways and keeping a streak. If you don't have to level to win, then don't. So Soju gets offered 3 silvers again, and we can do the whole thing. Do we want to go Ludens, Prep, Thrill? These are all pretty close and generic. We're looking at 3-2 now. And this is the generic spot. You can go ahead and look in compositions if you want to dive in deeper about what certain comps want at different intervals. But as you can tell, it's all pretty close. The thing that stood out to me is that Luden's Echo seems to be better when you're playing it in an AP composition because this does magic damage. And so the shred that you get from a static shiv will amplify the damage of Luden's Echo. So you attack 3 times, you cast, but you also zap people. They take more magic damage as you scale with each different stage. However, the caveat is there's not many units that actually deal damage and cast a lot. Soju only has Lux and Kaisa, and they don't even really have mana ramping items. So I don't actually really like Luden's Echo that much from this position. In fact, the only thing I think about is Thrill the Hunt. Preparation is really awkward. You're telling me that we have to put our 2-star units on the bench in order to get those preparation stacks. It's a little bit too awkward. Okay, so Soju goes with Thrill the Hunt. I think Thrill the Hunt's a really good choice. It synergizes really well with resistances. The more HP you have, the more effective resistances are, just because the way the multiplication works. And so I think Soju made a really good choice here, not getting baited by Luden's Echo because he doesn't have mana-based items to ramp. Soju buys a Draven pair and immediately hits a Draven 2. I actually really like this one roll because Soju could hit a Wukong 2. He could hit a Rel 2. Remember, Rel is in that orb. So he wants to make sure they can preserve a streak. When you're win streaking, you actually have more incentives to roll if you have multiple pairs, so that way you can keep your win streak going. He rolls and hits Draven, which is not exactly the unit he probably thought about he was going to play, but it adds extra damage and helps make sure he finish off these units. There's actually some really hidden synergies with like Lux leaving a bunch of units alive barely, and you don't want Lux to cast on these units. Draven will execute it with the ace, and then you'll make sure to keep pushing that front line further back in order to pressure your opponent's back line. So Soju's in a really, really good spot. He's probably memeing about how this is the first. This spot is unlosable. Standard prediction, this is the top 1. In reality, this is a game where he needs this early lead, and he's snowballing it very nicely. The egg hatches, gives him a little bit of gold, gives him a bow. So at this point, he's got to be thinking about Twisted Fate. Wait a second, hold on. Aurelion Soul showed up in the shop, and I think he has to ask himself a really important question. A-Soul is one of the best AP carries you can play around currently in the metagame. While he does have this bow and this shiv and an opportunity to play around Twisted Fate, I feel like this Aurelion Soul is worth playing right now. Plus, as you can tell, one of the best secondary effects for Aurelion Soul is the burn that you get to apply and wound your opponent. So that way they don't get as much heal, or we call it anti-heal for short. And so because he doesn't have Sunfire Cape and he has this Aurelion Soul, he doesn't actually have to build Sunfire Cape, and instead can think about how he wants to utilize his items differently. So now Aurelion Soul is a champ that he can play around. It does break apart some of his synergies. He was playing Sona for the Spellslinger and playing the Lux for the Star Guardian. But that's okay because Aurelion Soul is that good, and the benefit is he still gets to make 50 gold here somehow, probably selling Lux. This is one of those rare instances where selling a 2-star champion for a 1-star carry that you know you can play around is going to pay off dividends in the future. The last thing to factor into the equation is picking up 4 costs is really powerful in stage 3 when you know there's a guaranteed hero augment, because that means that you are likely to pair it up, and that means that you are very likely to hit 2-star. you're always looking around at the 4-2 hero augment thinking, how is everyone high rolling? How does everyone have 2 stars? It's because they're holding on to things like this. They get another copy from their hero augment. They just need that 1 extra copy of Aesol, 1 extra copy of Bel'Veth, etc. Samira, Nico, whatever they're looking for. Sojin's are going for Rage Blade. Again, remember, he's win streaking. He's trying to combine items to make sure to keep his tempo high. Rage Blade, Shiv, Archangels. This looks like a really powerful Twisted Fate setup. You can play Aesol temporarily. So as you think about leveling and figuring out what his best board is, at this point, he's just trying to make sure that he's playing enough stats. He could play Ox Force, but these Ox Force units aren't really high impact, and they already do what his composition is good at, which is give him a lot of frontline. So instead, he adds more utility. He adds Rammus and Morgana, who are really good at adding crowd control stuns and keeping his opponents in check and stalling for this Aurelion Soul. Right now, all of his damage is focused into Aurelion Soul ramping, which is with the Archangel Staff and the Rage Blade, stacking attack speed and that ability power, and Draven to add supplementary damage. The longer he can stall, the more damage that he'll do. And so having frontline units to tank and having backline units to add utility and stall with CC is a really good mix. Soju finds Twisted Fate. This is the exact unit that he was probably thinking about at the moment, and he has an Annie. Does he find a way to actually play both? He can actually take out the threats here, make 40 gold, and play both of them. You can also hybridize here. So Soju looks like says, okay, Rammus is the weaker unit. Yes, I have Shiv already with Morgana, but the CC is really valuable. Plus, again, it brings balance to the composition. He has 3 frontline units in Poppy 2, Rel, and Wukong 2. He has 3 damage units in Draven, Aurelion Soul, and Twisted Fate, and he has a nice utility CC unit. That is a very balanced team composition. Soju gets Zephyred. One weakness, it seems like, of Soju is that right now he's so focused onto his board and entertaining his chat, he's not scouting, but this is the person that has future sight, so it's very likely that they would be able to get a powerful Zephyr anyways. And look, looks like his frontline is so tanky that it doesn't matter that Appy's got the optimal Zephyr onto his Rageblade Archangel's Aurelion Soul and was able to get that win anyways. This is a nice side benefit, by the way, of having Archangel Staff, is that even if you get Zephyred, not the worst thing in the world, because Archangel Staff gets stronger over time. You still get some compensation scaling even though you're not attacking. So you find a Morgana pair. At this point, it's very interesting. I love the link of Neela to combine the Rel and Defender with the Twisted Fate and the Duelist. So just probably thinking about the next hero augment that's coming up at 4-2. It's guaranteed at this point. Slan's Redemption. Again, these are all items that are playable. They even synergize with each other. I don't know how he's played AP and he's found 4 tiers. That's also a high roll in itself. But right now he's thinking that I'm willing to play Twisted Fate. I want to play Aurelion Soul. I might be open to play Nico, but right now it's just good to think about these two. Twisted Fate synergizes really well with AoE carries. If you think about damage types, there's also classification beyond AD and AP. There's single target and AoE. And right now he has AoE from the Aurelion Soul and single target from Twisted Fate, meaning that backline carries that are squishy can get caught by things like Aurelion Soul, and frontline tanks can get melted by Twisted Fate. So you have really good synergy. Think about how your unit's damage type can synergize to make sure that you have a more holistic approach, that you don't get caught off guard. If he only had Aurelion Soul, he would have difficulty dealing with Super Tank, but if he only had Twisted Fate, he would have difficulty dealing with other compositions that scale their backline. So Soju's offered 4-3-3, a 4 cost, a 3 cost, and a 3 cost. We know that he's not really trying to play Spreadshot or Neela, and when you have 4 costs as your highest tier, you obviously want to go for a 4 cost. Garen's support augment is okay, it's pretty good, but I think it's not what he wants. He's looking for Twisted Fate or he's looking for Aurelion Soul. He has a threat on the board, so he rolls, he finds Bel'Veth. That's not what he's looking for. Plus, he has no Bel'Veth items, absolutely 0. If he played Bel'Veth there with a Rageblade, Shiv, and an Archangels, it won't carry. So he rolls again. Bunny Mercenary is interesting, but remember, Soju does have the Aesol and Twisted Fate, so we can pair up. MF is actually pretty good with these items, and this is Misfortune's best carry augment, so you can make a case for it, but he doesn't have it paired, so I think he wants to go for what's already paired. And remember, he's on a win streak, so he probably will roll for the 2-star of it. Definitely wants that Aesol. And this was also triggered, by the way, because he had Draven, and if you have Ace, you always have the opportunity of hitting an Ace hero augment. Only 2 more rolls left. He hits Samira. That's the other ace that's completely unplayable from this spot. Absolutely not the case. Can't really take recursion makes and reverberation. So at this point, we're in too deep. And he gets Void Mother, which is the support Bel'Veth augments. His face says it all. I mean, you gotta look at it. Pulling in the stats one more time. Let's just take the generic stats of Void Mother for the hero augment. The average placement of Void Mother is a 5.34, which means on average, you are doing worse than 5th place. In fact, I want to look at something real quick. If you go by hero augments and sort by the worst possible augments you can get, this is top 5 worst hero augments BFLs on the data. The only way you can do worse in this tier is if you take the Garen carry augment. Everything else, 4 cost and above, is better. Oh my god. By this point of the game, Soju's probably thinking about the next twit longer he's gonna write. He's probably thinking about DMing Mordog directly and complaining, what is this? This is unplayable. Void Mother? So you're gonna get, what, 2 little spawnlings? Give you frontline, which is actually one of the strengths of your composition. Do you take out Twisted Fate? Do you play it over Draven? At this point, I think Soju's thinking about, how do I best play for top 4? The only caveat is Soju has a huge HP lead. In fact, if you look at it, Appy's is at 93 HP, but the next highest is at 50 HP. So maybe he can play a bleed out strategy. So he levels and says, hey, look, I'm just going to try to preserve as much HP as I can. Plus, I can make 30 gold if I sell like Draven and these Ox Force units, because at this point, I think he's committed to playing mech plus threats. He's playing Belveth and Aurelion Soul plus mech, and have to pivot basically from his core strategy of Twisted Fate and Spell Slingers with Ox Force in order to make it work. But another thing to notice is that Soju has a lot of stuff going for him. His frontline is upgraded, and he does have some powerful units. And hey, I mean, Twisted Fate with no items is still contributing 2,000 damage, which also goes to show you that this unit is not normally. This Twisted Fate unit is not balanced at all. There's a reason why he's getting nerfed next patch. Soju didn't make gold here. Looks like he's keeping the possibility open. He's probably thinking in the back of his mind, there is a world where I still hit Twisted Fate too, and I'm just going to be playing like a flexible frontline. I'm not going to play 4 Ox Force, 4 Spellslingers. Maybe I hybridize it. I'm playing like 2 Defenders, 2 Ox Force, 2 Duelists, and trying to playing a wide composition. And this goes to show you how to maintain your flexibility, because he's not just saying like, okay, it's Mech Belveth plus Aurelion Soul, and that's the only possibility. He's keeping his options open just in case the other part of the ideal scenario comes in, which is, yeah, you don't have Twisted Fate hero augment carry, or you don't have the Aurelion Soul stun support augment. That's totally fine. I'll just make it happen. So he's keeping his options open and not just trying to greed. And look at that, he's actually still streaking. Wait, never mind, Twisted Fate. It's okay though, because that's still a good loss. Not even a real loss, you probably would say. And so now we need to think about what we actually want to do here. So if I were him, I'd probably work on a 3rd frontline item. He has right now the Protector's Vow and the Redemption, probably some kind of defensive component, so that way he can make sure that he has a 3rd item if he ends up committing to mech, which I think at this point it feels like almost a certainty. His frontline is very durable. You don't want to break apart your entire frontline at this point. There's no defensive components whatsoever. So he ends up taking a sword. I guess sword can start being made for Belveth items. A Belveth pair, and look, one of the nice side benefits of picking what looks like to be one of the worst augments in the game is that I don't think people are playing Belveth. Not many people are playing Belveth currently. So maybe he's able to 2-star this unit. I feel like Soju could roll a little bit here to try and improve his board, but if he also wants to get max economy to get to 50 and then roll, that's also viable. Soju's not really scouting a lot, and I think that actually brings us to a really good point. Sometimes scouting isn't going to be helpful. You want to prioritize what's important. In this case, Soju's trying to think really deeply about what his board is going to look like, because at this point, look at it. Other people have Twisted Fate 2. It looks like it's a 4-way contest. The classic, do I play the Twisted Fate lottery? I don't think Soju's going to be benefiting a lot by scouting and trying to get optimal position to kill 1 extra unit. He needs to figure out what his level 8 board is going to look like, because quite frankly, I don't even know what it looks like at the moment.
Is this game balanced? Thinking of playing it. Okay, the thing is, the game isn't very balanced, but it's worth playing. And also, I can already tell you're going to be good at the game, because the fact that you're watching me, the fucking LeBron James of TFT, like, it just me, like, you're just literally learning from the fucking best right now. Like, you're just absorbing infinite knowledge without even fucking, like, knowing.
Ah, okay, so we picked up a misfortune pair. At this point, Soju actually has a really interesting out of playing Ace plus Mech. So he didn't sell his Draven, and what he could do is use Draven as the sacrifice unit and enable the other Ace unit. So he could play Misfortune 2. In fact, Misfortune can hold these items. We talked about how Misfortune was a spot he could have played from before. If he picked Buddy Mercenary, funny enough, he might have had Misfortune 2 by now. And then he can play Draven being part of the sacrifice mech. He can get the defenders in because Garen and Wukong are mechs. And then he can actually find a way to play 4 aces if he finds Mordekaiser. That's another out that he's open to. And as a result, he's holding a really expensive bench. Hold on, let's count. 5, 4, 4, 13, 16, 19, 27, 29. You're telling me this guy has almost as much gold in his bank as he does on his bench? That is how much he's valuing the options. Again, he's not fully committing. He's just trying to make sure that he plays whatever he hits. This is good flex TFT, and Soju is showing you exactly why that is. Garen comes into the mix. He can play mech. He has Wukong. He has Draven. Still needs to find out if he can play 4 ace. But for now, if you don't find 4 A's, you can always just go into traditional mech and playing Bel'Veth plus, in this case, Aurelion Sol.
What the fuck is this? I'm fucking lost.
I think he's going to try to lean towards Misfortune because ultimately he has more copies of Misfortune than he does Acel. If you don't know what to play and they're pretty close, just go with whatever's paired up because you're more than likely to hit it. So just trying to make sure to manage some bench space. Does he sell the 40? I feel like at this point you can't. He has Nico pair, MF pair, Bel'Veth pair, Garen pair. He does not have an Acel pair. Garen and Misfortune. Okay, so that immediately means that Acel's probably out. Gotta put these items onto Misfortune. If he plays around Misfortune, it means that he doesn't have to keep in things like Aurelion Sol at all because she adds AoE damage. Twisted Fate is still single target, but you could also justify replacing Twisted Fate here. Ooh, Soji's gonna roll down all of his gold first. It's actually really, really wise. He's not just selling his 1 copy of a unit until he rolls down a lot of his gold. Oh my god, actually he didn't play this much fortune. Okay, he looks dizzy, He can actually itemize Bel'Veth here. He can go for a Last Whisper, which is one of the most important items when you play Bel'Veth. He can make Gunblade. Actually, Last Whisper Bel'Veth plus Gunblade is actually a really powerful combination. Some people might even say that it is close to optimal, BIS, if you will. And this shows you a good lesson of figuring out how to play for items even after you've made this pretty substantial side pivot. I wouldn't call this a full pivot. I would call this probably a half pivot from Soju, so it's not like a full pivot, but I think he did a really good job with his itemization and figuring it out. Again, he's on 4 loss, so he's trying to figure out what his board state is, but at this point we can put in 2-star units and replace the weak units. Twisted Fate, one of the best, if not the best AP carry to currently base your game plan around, but he is not better than Misfortune 2, and in this case, either Acel 2 or Nico 2. Plays Syndra because he wants to supplement his front line. He has 4 Defender plus Star Guardian, and he can throw in some more units to stall. Remember, ultimately, Soju wants to stall. He has Rageblade, he has Rageblade and Archangel. These are 2 items that stall and get stronger the longer the fight goes. He puts Rageblade on Bel'Veth, which is kind of interesting. I feel like Rageblade would be really good as a mana item replacement for Misfortune, but maybe he thinks he can go for a really powerful item off Carousel and complement it. And Bel'Veth doesn't want that many more items than something like Rageblade. You can go for like a Titans. I feel like at that point, you're just kind of nitpicking. Soju's lost 5 in a row, but most importantly, Soju's lost 50 HP with 5 losses. And that's a really important thing to note is that the quality of losses do matter. On average, he's only losing by a couple units per fight, which is actually quite good. Not all losses are created equally. Soju's actually eco-losing, as he would like to say. This time, he's actually unironically eco-losing instead of just saying that in order to keep his chat engaged from a very bad position. He's playing some excellent TFT. At this point, most of his board is upgraded. He's holding on to Draven, which almost confirms that he's thinking about 4 ace at this point. He can go to 9, look for Mordekaiser and Samira, replace things like this Aurelion Sol. I love the inclusion of Aurelion Sol. As much as he did replace the items and move it off of Acel, he still needs that anti-heal to make sure that his opponents don't heal past his big bursts. And it looks like Soju takes a 6 loss. Okay, this is starting to get a little bit sketchy in the sense that you're not entirely sure if Soju just bleeds out to a 4th place, maybe lands to a 5th. But again, a lot of the HP that he preserved did such a good job. And I do think that going to 9 is the correct call, or at least looking at 9. Just because you say you're going to try to go to 9 doesn't mean you have to go for it. He's going to wait to see if he absolutely needs to roll at 8, but he doesn't have much to roll for. Almost no upgrades outside of Aurelion Sol 2, and I don't think it would have done much of a difference. Soju picks up Sunfire Cape, which means that now he can replace Aurelion Sol into his composition, and it's also a decent item onto this Garen. There's no other real item that I think that he would really go for at this point. 53 is a little bit on the pricey side, and I'm not entirely sure what he would actually even wants to replace it with. He plays a second Syndra, and I guess at this point, he's just trying to throw in more units to stall. Again, ramp both of these champions, ramp Bel'Veth, ramp Misfortune, and hope that it's good enough to stall for against his opponent. Positioning doesn't really matter. He's spacing everything out because he recognizes there's a lot of AoE at this phase of the game. You're talking about people who have Fiddlesticks, Janna. You're looking at, you know, if your opponent's playing Garen, if there's a random Urgot, you don't want to be caught by AoE. So right now in the current environment, you want to actually spread out your units. Oh, this is really funny. The Voidlings that get spawned actually catch a Zephyr from Appies. Again, this is something Soju's not exactly paying attention to, but if you are in a spot to think about how you can manipulate positioning to disrupt things like Zephyr, it ends up being pretty effective. Appies doesn't look particularly too strong here, so it looks like Soju gets a very crucial win. If Soju can win these next two, you'll have that buffer room to go to 9 and play a different board. More importantly, it looks like he's secured top 4. You know, by getting this win, it feels like it's inevitable that the 4th and 5th place player will match against each other, so he secured that top 4. Soju techs in Quick Draw here to make his Misfortune better. Quick Draw is a really nice synergy just to add that bonus damage to Misfortune. I think Kaisa is a little bit better for the Star Guardian, but it's not that Star Guardian is a really important aspect because he already has 2 locked in with the Rel on the board plus the Syndra. And the secondary effect of Ezreal is actually quite nice. He does a chilling effect, which slows your opponent's attack speed. Oh my god, he actually wins this fight. That's huge. And so Ezreal actually has a little bit of utility. So if you're ever caught in between, hey, is Kaisa or Ezreal better here? Think about some of their secondary effects. In this case, Kaisa just adds more damage. Ezreal actually has a little bit more utility by slowing attack speed, and that's how Soju makes some of those differences in terms of his calls. At this point, we turn the corner. We've played for top 4. How can we play for top 2 and above? He's kept his Draven. We're going to go into an ace situation, I think, most likely. He's also holding Garen, so now Soju has multiple outs. Oh, Dual Gauntlet for Misfortune sounds really good. A 3rd damage item for her is really powerful. Plus, he has all this ramping AP, so you have the ability to make all of that bullet crit, and you have that quick draw, really strong. Let's go over Soju's outs real quick. So he can go for 4 aces with the mech. He can go for Garen 3. He can go for 2-star legendaries like Syndra 2-star, Fiddlesticks 2, Urgot 2, Janna 2, etc. He even play for Ezreal too because he has that parallel that can connect the quick draw with Misfortune. Soju's in a really good spot. And more importantly, you can kind of see how a lot of these Twisted Fate players, because they were contesting each other, don't have that strong of a board in order to keep up with Soju's raw stats. If they're barely getting the win here, they're going to struggle to beat Soju if he's able to get a max cap board at level 9. Looks like Soju does take the loss here, though. Twisted Fate is really strong. Misfortune not able to get the kills on some of these Oxforce units. Looks like he still struggles with dealing enough damage to these Oxforce units. And here we go. We're going to level 9. And Soju's priority here is to, 1, upgrade his existing boards. So he wants to hit things like Syndra 2. He wants to get the 4 ace. Here's Mordekaiser. We just need Samira at this point. Nobody's really playing Samira outside of Appies. And we have 4 A's. We can play it immediately. You can replace things like that Fiddlesticks. He replaces the Leona because he wants to sacrifice the Draven for the ace. How's his positioning look? Seems like he's just going to go for a generic swap. He doesn't have enough time to actually scout. This is a nice little trick you can do to try and get the edge over opponents. Oh no, because he didn't scout. And Appies has 2 Zephyrs. Appies was able to get the Zephyr on the Belveth and the Garen. That is very difficult to deal with. But at the same time, I don't think Appies is well equipped to deal with mech. Appies, for example, doesn't even have Last Whisper on this Samir in the top left corner. She's just stuck on the mech entirely. So yeah, you cleaned up some of the units, but it doesn't matter. Soju gets the easy win. Soju's bench is now starting to be high quality because he's holding things like Garen 2, chasing Garen 3. Throwing another Garen 2 in the mix is very powerful. So Soju is make sure to keep his bench tailored to be really powerful. Another Fiddlesticks is really strong. In general, the best unit to throw in when you're playing Syndra in late game scenarios is Fiddlesticks because he is a unit that can take damage and also will guarantee cast. The problem with a lot of units like, you know, Urgot or throwing in Janna, etc., they have powerful effects, but they're not guaranteed to cast. But Fiddlesticks will because he drops the aggression as if he has an Edge of Night and will be able to get the cast. Another really good use of Syndra is if you have Oxforce in, you can throw in more Oxforce units because if your Oxforce is active, they will get that trait and that 1 second of immunity. And so Soju, because he doesn't have Oxforce, isn't going to be racking it up. Instead, he's going to be throwing in Garens. At this point, Soju's composition is pretty much done. He's got 4 ace, 4 defender, mech. This is a build that you don't really see people playing. At this point, I think you can think about what he can do to disrupt his opponent. I like to Shroud a lot to make sure that, 1, he can Shroud his opponents if they're trying to get off like a really powerful cast with a bunch of spell slingers, or let's say they have a big amount of AoE like this Urgot, for example. Shrouding it would be huge. And the second thing would be to make sure he doesn't get shrouded. He has units like Misfortune without mana generating items. And so if he gets shrouded, it's going to delay the cast. And while you're okay with it because you have Archangels, you just don't want that to happen to you, especially if you're playing other units like Mordekaiser and Syndra as well. I think at this point, a lot of people wonder, should I be taking out things like Defender, taking in Aegis? I don't think it matters very much. One of his matchups is attack damage, and the other matchup is ability power. So he actually has a pretty good even split. Soju actually frontlines the Samira, which is fascinating, to try to draw the Zephyr. This is a really cool move that is making it difficult for Appies to predict where the Zephyr should go. So if you put small units that honestly don't matter, Samira 1 is not really contributing much except for maybe getting an ace proc here and there. He's using her to bait that Zephyr and make sure that mech doesn't get caught. Really nice, thoughtful positioning here from Soju. One of his biggest strengths, honestly, as a player is identifying late game micro situations, and I think is one of the most underrated aspects of his play. Appies, again, need to get money Zephyrs on things like Misfortune, the mech. Missed on both. Great job dodging the Zephyrs by putting things like that Syndra next to that Misfortune, putting things like the Samira next to that mech. And at this point, I think we've kind of understood where this is going. Soju has really high cap to play for. At this point, he's chasing multiple Fiddlesticks on his bench, wants to line up the proper Shroud. I think against this opponent, he has to be careful not to clump too hard in case there's a bunch of AoE. We know that there's Urgot 2 on the other side. We know that there's Mordekaiser 2 with not just an Oxforce emblem, but also an Archangel staff. He tries to shroud the left side. This is not that great a shroud. In fact, shrouding Twisted Fate is quite useless. He has 30 mana, so he's almost going to cast guaranteed. So I think he was anticipating a potential swap on the other side, but it looks like his opponent did end up getting the correct positioning. That Mordekaiser 2 and Urgot punished him heavily. And so you can see Soju might lose this game if he misses a shroud and lets his carries get lined up. We talked about AoE. He clumped his MF and his Syndra on the same side, meaning that the one cast from Mordekaiser wipe them. Has to be careful if he wants to win out here. At this point, Soju's thinking about what is my win condition, and it's very much just laying that correct shroud and spreading out his positioning correctly. I think he's probably willing to sell things like this Belveth if he ends up hitting like a miraculous like Ezreal 2 out of nowhere or something that could be better than Belveth with support augment, which is quite frankly not doing a lot. These Voidlings that get spawned are probably just going to die to the Mordekaiser cast or the Twisted Fate AoE. So he's probably open to it, but he's so poor. And more importantly, he wants to make sure his bench quality is good. Probably sell a Garen here or a Fiddlesticks because you don't want Garen 1 to be pulled or Fiddlesticks 1. You prefer it to be the 2-star unit. He's holding Garen just in case he hits, but looks like he's selling to find the best case scenario of Mordekaiser. If he can hit Mordekaiser 2, that's what he's going for. That's why he sells his Garens. I'm sure his chat is really unhappy about it. Oh, Soju goes for a Zeke. He rips the Anvil last second just in case he gets a Zephyr so he can surprise his opponent. But he doesn't get the proper Shroud. But Misfortune is not getting hit by the Mordekaiser. So incidentally enough, his opponent switching sides with Mordekaiser may have not worked out his benefit, but Misfortune needs to cast. Oh my god, it's so close. Thrill the Hunt. Thrill the Hunt came up huge. Okay, Soju got kind of bailed out by his opponent, switching his Mordekaiser to the other side unnecessarily. These kinds of late game situations are always really difficult to navigate because it's 50-50. It kind of depends on whether or not your opponent thinks you're going to switch or you've seen them switch before historically, so you anticipate that happening. Soju did a really good play. He sells his Mordekaiser, so that way he can get the Shroud on his bench and use it again. Yes, Mordekaiser 2 is great, but at this point, the most important thing is to land a money Shroud. And he's spreading out his units, so that way he has ability to shroud every part of the board. He shrouds the Mordekaiser. His opponent was on 8 Urgots, so he's trying to deny the Urgots. He's also making sure to buy the Garen after the Fiddlesticks gets thrown in, guaranteed by the Syndra 2. I don't think these Urgots unitemized can get it done. Looks like the Misfortune does end up surviving. Soju is pretty much going to close it out from this point on. Really well played overall. It was a spot that started off really rocky. He had the opportunity to play for AP. He got more dogged on his augment choices and had to play Belveth support. But the LeBron James of TFT came through, showing you how to play flexible within your game plan. He had to adapt to it. And best of all, Soju's able to top it off with the first from a situation where, data-wise, these augments are underperforming. People don't take Defender hard at the beginning. People don't take support Belveth in that spot and go first from it. But if you are able to play to your outs, stay flexible, and make sure to understand your win condition, you too can take unplayable spots to our first place. So what did you guys think about K3 Soju's play? Was there a moment or something happened that I didn't cover? If so, ask in the comments below and I'll reply. That's it for this edition of In Too Deep with Frodan. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.